Welcome back, friends, to the shop. Do you guys know what this old hat's called? You old-timers might know. I was actually sitting down, I'm doing a video to show how to repair down jackets and sleeping bags and things. And as I was putting everything together, I came across Granddad's old felt crusher hat. And it brought back a memory and a story I wanted to share with you. Granddad was smaller than me, so it's a little bit too small. But I'll tell you the story, and then we'll do the video. We'll do it later. So every year. So as I said before, I started hunting with my granddad when I was 12. And if you're not from the U.S., it's been for some time. A boy or a girl could start hunting when they were 12 years old. You have to go through a hunter safety course and of course be with an adult. And I was going with my grandfather when I was younger, probably as young as 8 or so, but I couldn't carry a rifle and I had to walk. I just walked with him, and that's the way we did it. So when I was 12, I was very excited. My dad took me to it was like I think it was basically like a gun show, and I got my first rifle. It was a 30-06 Remington 700 with a wood stock. And I was very excited to go hunting, and Granddad took me to the G.I. Joe's store that was in just outside of Portland, and bought me one of these hats, a red. They called them crushers. They when you bought them, they were rolled up in a little plastic deal. That's why they called them crusher, because you could stuff them in a pocket or something like that. And that's what he always wore, and he always wore a red one. He'd wear them so long that the dye would run out of them and they would turn pink, and then he'd go get another one. I'd get one almost every year because I was growing so fast that the one from the previous year wouldn't fit. So we would that was kind of our ritual. We'd get a new pair of hunting boots and a red crusher hat. And we'd go by the thrift store. Go by the thrift store because Granddad said, you got to hunt in, well, he didn't want me in that nylon anymore. He had to hunt in wool or gabardine. I still don't know what gabardine is. Some sort of a heavy cloth, because it's warm, it resists moisture, keeps you insulated, but most of all, it's quiet. You can stalk and sneak around in it. Funny story though, I'll tell you with the crushers. We would hunt over in Hell's Canyon. Hell's Canyon is up in the northeast corner of the state. It's actually a deeper canyon than Grand Canyon, and I packed a few elk out of the bottom of that. It took all day. You go down early in the morning. If we shot an elk down there in the bottom, we always started on the top. We'd go down there and we'd butcher them and cut them all the meat off the bone and just bring the meat out. So you didn't have to pack the bones out, and it was a one-day trip. Hands and feet crawling out of there. I remember coming out of that canyon, at times it was so cold you couldn't sweat. And that's saying a lot when you're climbing vertical, hands and feet with 65, 70 pounds on your back of bleeding meat. So anyway, I'll tell you the story about the crusher. I'll tell you a different story. It just came to mind. So Granddad, we would go hunt opening morning. Typically when you're hunting over there, if you didn't get your animal on the opening morning, your chances really plummeted, because those animals are smart, and they figure out really quickly when they hear the shooting, and they get deep and they get hard to find. So this particular year we were hunting elk, Rocky Mountain elk, and we didn't do any good. We'd been up there a week and no luck. And most guys, when they would pack up at the end of the day, you'd put away your rifle and the tents and all that stuff and just head home and just call it a bust. Granddad was always insisted that we kept the rifles up in the cab. He said, just keep them in the cab. I haven't been known to be able to get an animal on the way back. And, it does happen from time to time. So we had done that as always, and sure enough, we weren't maybe 15, 20 minutes out of camp, and all of a sudden, right in front of us, here a bunch of cows are running back and forth. Now, these are not like bovine cows. A cow is what you call a female elk, cows and bulls. Typically, when you see cows, a harem of cows, there will often be a bull in there. And Granddad hit the brakes and said, "Oh, get out, get out." I had, at that particular time, we just started using Harris bipods. I was shooting 300 Weatherby Magnum. And so, of course, there wasn't any trees or any cover around or anything, and of course the most steadiest shot you can get is a prone shot. So I immediately flopped those bipods down, went into prone right in the middle of the road, and started scanning back and forth, scanning, and in the middle of that harem of cows was a bull. And I was back and forth, I'm watching, waiting for an opportunity, right? And sure enough, he turned sideways, and I got a shot, not very far, maybe 100 yards or so. I saw the impact. When you hit an animal like that, this may sound a little gruesome, but it's the reality. If you have the wherewithal to look through your scope, what you see is on the backside, you'll see almost a red mist. You'll see just a spray out the back, especially when you're shooting those big magnums, and I knew that I'd hit him. He turned and ran off to the south, and what we would typically do back then was we would wait. When you shot an animal like that, what you wanted it to do was to run off if it wasn't a complete clean kill, which rarely is the case because they're so strong and so hardy. We'd just sit and wait about a half hour, Granddad always said, and then let it bed down. It'll bed down because it's not feeling well, and it will eventually, it'll lose so much blood that it'll just lose consciousness and die. If you continue to jump it and to spook it, it can keep going through adrenaline, and ultimately you'll lose it. That can happen. You don't want to do that. But this one, it was a good clean shot. It didn't go much more than maybe 100 yards or so, and it fell down. So we ran over there. We grabbed. We used to carry our a belt. We kind of had like a battle belt today, a hunting belt on there. We would have a pack of cartridges. We'd carry about 20 cartridges. Our hunting knife, hunting skinning knife, and a hatchet. We always carried a small hatchet because if you've ever butchered an animal, it's really hard to get through the pelvic girdle. And some guys will use saws, and we just would use a hatchet, chop through that, and then you can bone it out and do the rest with the knife. So we grabbed our belts and ran over there. Well, when we got to it, of course, it's laying there, and it was still breathing. And you don't want those animals to suffer. And a lot of guys think, well, just pull up your rifle there and give it another shot. Yeah, that could be do it. Granddad never did it that way. He always he would just cut the throat. And so what happened on this particular day is it was a big spike, and we walked up to it, and Granddad got there first, and he grabbed it by its antler and stepped over it. And of course, pulled the neck back. The quickest way to dispatch something like was to cut its throat. He no more than had done that, and here I heard a ruckus behind me, and here come this guy running up, out of breath, with the whole side of his face was bleeding, and it looked like he just got beat up, like really bad beat up. He was carrying a hunting rifle, breathing. He'd been running, looked like he'd fallen down. That's what he'd done to his face, and he was super excited about something. And he ran right up to us and pulled his rifle up on my Granddad and said, "Hey, that's my elk." And Granddad looked over it. And usually you can see. There was obviously no other holes in it or anything. The guy had not shot it. He had evidently spooked this thing, and he had missed and had gotten away from him, and that's what jumped it across the road for us when we got it. He looked over. He said, No, I saw the boy. The boy shot it. And he's like, "No, that's my elk." He pulled up his rifle, and this was, he's maybe 10, 15 feet away from my Granddad. He pulled up his rifle on my grandfather as he's, straddled this elk with his knife, and said, "I'll shoot that blankety blank 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 so full of holes that it ain't gonna have it. There won't be any meat for anybody." This was a tense situation. I don't know how old I was. It's probably maybe 16, 17, maybe even younger. Wasn't very old. And here this guy pulled up on my Granddad, and he's drunk and he's aggressive. My Granddad looked at him with, I'll never forget it. He had that Gerber A400, the same knife that I've shared with you, my old hunting knife. The knife designed by Almar, all bloody hand and all that. And he shook it at that guy, and he said, "You better just go ahead and get on out of here." That was basically it. And it was waving the knife at him. Well, I didn't know what to do, so I turned, and I've got my rifle on this guy. So I've got my rifle on this guy. He's got his rifle on my Granddad. My Granddad's got a bloody knife standing over an elk. And all of this just took place in just seconds. I didn't know which way it was going to go. I'll tell you, to be honest, I hadn't mentally prepared to be in a situation like that, and I've had a lot of years to think about that since and what I would have done differently. If I had to, I don't know, but I think if I had to do that over again now, having the training that I do now, knowing what I do now, and having a lot more experience, there's a good chance that I would have shot that guy the moment he started to pull up on my Granddad. And I always I thought about that for years after that had happened. You know, why didn't I do a better job of intervening, you know, or even tackling the guy or something, other than just stand there and you know, in confusion, not know what to do. And you know, I guess I could attribute that maybe to age and lack of experience, but you know, that's hindsight, right? So anyway, so here we are. We're in this standoff. My heart's going 1,000 miles an hour. Granddad didn't seem to be bothered at all by it. Fortunately, this guy's buddy came up, caught up with him. And started talking some reason into him, and got him to put the gun down, and basically said, "Hey, you know, you could see that the animal had been shot once, and that was by me." And the guy went away, and he was ranting and cursing and swearing the whole way. But that's the story. That's how it happened. Anyway, I was just thinking about that, and when we used to go over there. There was, of course, my granddad had been hunting over in that area since, whoa, goodness, since he got out of the war in the late 40s. And the family had been going over there and hunting that same ground forever, long time. And so it was kind of funny, I probably should tell you this another time, but there was another group that had been going there a long time, and they were the Black Hats. And they were the red, and we were the Red Hats. You know, this all happened before my time. We just kind of were born into it and came into it. So we proudly always wore our red hats, and we'd see these guys. You know, it was like the Hatfields and the McCoys, right? And I don't know that anyone ever scrapped or had a fight or anything, but I do remember one time when I was there in our group, we used to hunt with radios. This was before you could buy those Motorola ones. We had these great big ones with the metal antennas, and they'd take about 500 batteries. Big powerful things, and you'd have to go to the radio guy, and he'd put a crystal in there. You know, this was old time stuff, right? But I remember it just so happened that these Black Cat guys happened to be on the same frequency as our radios when we were hunting, and one of the guys in our camp heard a guy said, "Yeah, I got one of those Red Hats up in my sight," because we would hunt in drives. And I'll tell you about that another time. So he'd been up on a perch, and he'd seen one of the guys in the red hat, and he was, you know, just talking some trash. "Oh, I got one of these guys in my sights." He was looking at one of our guys from his scope. Well, we were doing the same thing, and one of our guys saw where he was at, had been watching him for a long time, and keyed up on the radio and said, "Well, I got you in my sights too, Black Cat." So it was always that deal there. And again, I don't remember anyone having a fight, or if they did, I never heard about it. But it was just kind of, it was kind of one of those things growing up. But yep, that's it. Brought back a lot of memories. I don't even know if they make these hats anymore. I can still see the logo in here. Made in USA, genuine, Effenem, EFFANEM, 100% wool crusher, established 34, 24, whatever. I thought it was felt, but they are wool. And yeah, and one last thing I'll show you here. He still has his chauffeur pen from Oklahoma chauffeur's license, 1938, number 62965. Granddad wasn't a chauffeur, and I don't remember. If he told me, I don't recall, but I think he had to have this to do some sort of driving. Maybe he was a delivery driver, or I know he delivered the mail on a Harley with a side cart for a long time, if that was it, or what, I don't know what it is, but that was kind of brought back a lot of memories right there. I'll tell you what, I sure do miss that man. I look forward to walking the streets of gold with him someday. I'll tell you, and close with this. One of my favorite books of all time is a children's book by Shel Silverstein called The Giving Tree. You're probably familiar with it if you have kids. And the story is this. It's a young boy that grows up with a tree, and when he's young, he sits in the tree's branches, and he climbs the tree, and he eats the tree's fruit. And as he gets older and older, he keeps coming back to the tree for things, and he comes to the tree because he needs a house, and he needs a lumber, and the tree says, "Well, you can use me to build your house." And then he takes from the tree, and then as he grows older and moves on, and his life becomes busy, he forgets about that tree, and he's taken all that the tree can give. The tree has nothing left. And at the very end of the book, the young boy, of course, is an old man, and he comes back to see the tree, and there's nothing left there but a stump. And the tree says, don't have anything left to give you. You know, and the tree's not resentful. It's just a matter of fact. And the old man says, I just need a place to sit. And you know, it's a wonderful story, and I think I've always liked that story because you know, it's tears of joy, I promise you. But I like that story because that tree was my grandfather for me growing up. And, you know, when I got into my, I guess, teens and 20s, you know, I didn't have, you just don't have time for your granddad too much anymore. And, you know, you're going your own way. And I'm just grateful that, you know, several years before he passed on, that I had gotten to the point in my life where I had some sanity back and settled down and started raising my own family, and I had the opportunity for my son to meet him. But I do look forward to that day. When I could see him again. That's all. Year-old Granddad with his great-grandson, Jack, on a quad. Not too bad. So how old are you going to be on your birthday this year?
I was 82 the other day.
So, is this the first time you've been on a quad? What do you like better, quads or motorcycles? They don't fall over on a quad. So, what do you think of this place?
Nice. Yeah. Well, that'd be something else. Anywhere.
Could be anywhere.